Okay, this is Tim Kaine on Games Without End and New Game Plus. I do have a worry that I'm going to be yapping on with this one because this does have to do with game design, in my opinion, or just general game design theory. And if anybody has been on this channel for even the smallest of moments, you know that I love to yap about game design and theory. Yapping is nice. I like to do it. All right, let's jump in.
Hi everyone, it's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today I'm going to talk about game endings and New Game Plus. Two different things, they're kind of related. I'll explain why. I have two different questions I'm answering here. I'll talk about the first one, talk for a bit, and then when I talk about New Game Plus, I'll bring in the other person who asked.
Okay.
The first one is from Ian Akamoto, who writes, would love to hear your thoughts on games that end and return the player to the menu upon completing the main quest line versus games that allow the player to continue playing on. Wondering if you favor a specific camp and how a developer might approach this choice.
Oh, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. I've never thought about what I prefer. Maybe just because I always feel that it depends. As with everything with game design, it depends. Sometimes I don't mind being kicked back to the main menu. Usually there's a credits, right? And the credits are a way to release the player, especially because ends of games are usually quite tense or emotional. And the credits scene, it's like the credits in a movie. It's just like a, whew, all right, I gotta think about that. What just happened? But I think that there are other ways that you can achieve that through like epilogues or through allowing the player to continue, but having a bit of post game content. Red Dead Redemption comes to mind in both cases as highly emotional endings that allow you to play on and have some sort of epilogue, but they do it in such a great way that paces your gameplay and allows you to unpack what you just experienced. You kind of like when a game ends and you just continue doing your shit, but some games are meant to just end. Yeah, I think it just depends. For me, I don't know if I prefer any over another, but I can probably, if I'm playing a game where I want it to just continue. Baldur's Gate 3, beautiful example. Baldur's Gate 3, you have this super emotional ending, and then the game, before they added the epilogue, ended. There was no information of what your characters did after the ending of the game. There was no information of how the world might have changed based on your flavor of ending here. It just kind of was like, okay, I just spent 120 hours or something with these characters, and okay, nothing happened. Like, now they did add the epilogue afterwards, but I was a player, on day one, and I experienced the game just ending, and it was really, really fucking frustrating. Don't do that. If you have a game where you're expecting the players to get emotionally interested in the game and the story and the characters, don't just end it. At the very least, do something like Fallout New Vegas or Mass Effect, where you show me the consequences of my choices. How did the world change? How did factions change? How did characters change? What did they do afterwards, right? That matters. So sometimes, like I said, it depends on the game. It just depends. It all depends. Red Alert never ends. There's just another skirmish. It is a good game.
Okay, I think it's pretty obvious that I favor the game ending choice since it's pretty much what my games all do. Part of the reason I did this is when you have an ending, that's when you can do the reactivity that you can't do in game. Like, I like the idea that people make choices in my game and have immediate reactions from people. This shopkeeper won't sell to you. This guy doesn't like you.
Yeah.
A companion leaves the group. Those are immediate. But the end slides are things that are far more distant in time. Like, because you did this, this town became a political force
Culture and Chronicles
over the
will have this,
next
by the way.
2 decades. Because you did this, everybody eventually moved away from the village and the village collapsed. Because you did this, this demon is loose and it's going to wreak havoc
Oops.
all over the countryside until maybe another more daring adventuring party puts it down.
But you can still have. I think the difference here is that he's talking about games that just cut to black versus ones that have some some consequences of your actions, then cut to black. I think there's also you can do the consequences and then the epilogue, right, or allow the player to continue playing. There, Bethesda games all do this, right? They allow you to continue playing afterwards. Hey, Coffee Cafe, your head is like his microphone with the placement behind the giant pop filter. Yeah, he's speaking to me. What did you say, Daddy Tim? I like that. I never thought about that. How you doing, Coffee?
These are like about end slides. It kind of tells the player, I saw what you did. I see the choices you made. Do you realize that some of them aren't immediate? Some of the consequences. Some of the consequences are long term. Own them.
I like
So
when,
because of that,
and I really like when writers think about that, especially in RPGs. That's why Baldur's Gate 3, the ending for me was really frustrating. And I was like, guys, and they even said that, well, we didn't expect players to want this. You're making an RPG where the characters are a center focus and you didn't expect players to care enough about their characters after 100+ hours to want to know if they did something afterwards? Like, what? And it's clear that their game was pretty heavily influenced, I think, by Mass Effect. And it's like, well, Mass Effect had it. Mass Effect had ending slides. Fallout New Vegas had ending slides. And I think these were something that people remember is like, what did my choice with the Krogan do? How did having Rex and Eve as the leaders of, with the genophage cured, spoilers, change the Krogan homeworld? What did that do? And so, yeah, I think that that's really important to have. If you have reactivity in your game, you have choices in your game. Not all choices will have immediate effects, and I like to see how that turns out by the end of the game, even if it's something that I won't see by the end of the game.
that it lets me have that kind of reactivity, short and long term, that I want.
I was gonna say
But
spoilers
also
after
having
the
a game
fact.
end very much encourages replayability. When you play a game and you're getting your choice and consequence, you're
He's
getting your
right, by the
immediate
way.
consequences, and then you see those long term consequences, a lot of players are like, I'm going to play again. And this time I'm going to be this class, or I'm going to take these skills, and I'm
Exactly.
going to do something different with this group, or I'm going to join this group, or I'm going to kill this group. It's fun.
And even if it's not fun to replay the game yourself, just because what percentage of players do you think played Baldur's Gate 3 more than once? Probably not that many. I played it 4 times. I get that other people wanted to play it more times too, but most players will not do it. The vast majority. But if you have those choices and consequences, players can see how other people's stories turned out and can watch other people play the game on YouTube or Twitch and discover new ways for that story to unfold. Hey, Karos, just wanted to say thank you again. You inspired me a few days ago to finally start my game to journey, and I did. It's the Art Mini Quest 1 jam, and I've already finished and uploaded the concept art part of the jam and currently working on modeling. Just want to say, you're an amazing, inspiring person. Well, thank you so much, man. I think you're gonna make me cry or something. But I'm really glad that you did the Art Mini Quest 1 jam. I'd love if you showed me what you made for that. And if you work on any more future jams, I'd love to see what you do with that. Thank you so much. I'm really glad that I inspired you with that. That's that's unbelievable that I could ever inspire or motivate anybody. So I appreciate that you felt that way. My buddies are on their 6th playthrough. Hey, he's right though. Having reactivity, having those consequences where you show the player what happened, that can create replayability or at least interest for people to. It's almost like you gain the ability to ask people, what choice did you make, right? It's why I think for me, watching other people play Mass Effect is so fun because I get to see other people go through those same emotional ups and downs, right? With something that really cool that happened and something that made me cry and still makes me cry. I get to see that, but I also get to see, okay, what choice did they make here? Because I know how it branches. And I know that the long lasting implications of, for instance, during Morden's loyalty question too, if you keep the research data or if you choose to discard the research data, this is huge. This prevents you or enables you to cure the genophage. Spoilers. Sorry. And it's like, I love to see it because it's like, ooh, are they going to do it? Oh, he didn't keep it. Watch people decide who dies, right? Or like if you know that Tally is gonna die during the in Mass Effect 3, she's gonna commit seppuku. If you don't have enough points, and I know how those points are calculated because I like the system of it, I can be like, oh, he doesn't have enough points. Sewer slide.
Especially when you have a game that has such reactivity.
Yeah.
They're like fun game toys that let you play with them. Now, I do occasionally find myself leaning towards the idea of designing a game where you can keep playing after you finish the main quest line. But I'm going to give two big caveats to developers who select this choice. First of all, you have to bear in mind that if you are going to have content past the main quest line ending and you want to show reactivity in that content, you're going to spend money to do this.
And this is actually relevant for us because I still do not know if I want Cauldron Chronicles to be continuable after the game ends. I have good reasons to do it. I have good reasons not to do it. One of them is money. One of them is that I'd have to create some way to randomly generate clients, but those clients would not be as interesting as the handwritten clients that we would have for the main story, in which case either we this is gonna be a tangent because I've really been thinking about this. This is really frustrating me. We either have to have our main NPCs in the game mixed with randomly generated NPCs so that the randomly generated ones after the game ends don't feel out of place, or that you have been prepared for those to be the only things that you deal with. Well, now we make the main story bit feel, not only is it going to take up a lot more time, which may not be a good thing for the game. Games being, a game that is meant to be 30 hours, being 60 hours, is not a good thing always. In fact, it very rarely is. You get handwritten NPCs through updates and stuff. I could do that. That's one of the reasons we should do it. But then we have all the mud that we have to fix with the main game. What about a new game plus where you just expose a bunch of the existing systems, but a difficult hike and a few minor twists? That could work too. I don't know. I don't know what to pick because both of them have pros and cons. I don't know which one to pick. But that is something we will have to decide in Vertical Slice, right? Prototype, maybe not so much, but that is something that I will have to decide before we jump in to budgeting the rest of the game. Is will there be any content after the game ends, or will we cut to black? Will we show the players consequences in the game, cut to black? I think that we could say, hey, you are allowed to play the game further from here. We're going to make a separate save, right? So that if you wanted to start a new game, this is going to be separate and you can continue forward. And if we release new characters, they will automatically be added to the pool of characters that we spawn. And that way you can play it on an older save, or I don't know. I don't know. You can play sort of scaling back of making a lot of dedicated content, I think. I think there are ways to do New Game Plus properly and ways to do New Game Plus poorly. I'm not a fan of New Game Pluses that don't change anything, right? Like, don't even do something small. And other games that do New Game Plus but allow you to carry through with your old equipment oftentimes make the New Game Plus feel worse because now the game just isn't balanced. Now you've messed with progression. And I can appreciate to some extent what like Bethesda wanted to do with Starfield's New Game Plus, although I don't think it's a game that needed New Game Plus. It was to me it was like a who asked sort of thing. I don't know. New Game Plus is you have to put thought into it if you want to do it properly, and I think a lot of people tack it on as a way to say that the game is replayable when it doesn't really have much reason to be replayable. So I have to ask myself with Cauldron Chronicles, that's our game, do I want this to be replayable in the sense that a New Game Plus is warranted? And can I do it in a way that feels good? Or should this be New Game Plus? Should it just be that you start a new game, that you make a new character? We save new content for DLC or even a free one after release. But then how do we introduce that new content? Do we introduce it at the end of the game? And in which case now those new NPCs won't have anything to do with the old content. Or if we allow them to be viable both with existing content and after the game is completed, we have to spend a lot of money to go that extra mile, which I think will make it very memorable, but it will cost a lot of money to develop, an awful lot, and an awful lot more time to spend because we don't know when the player is going to be adding this DLC, right? And when these new characters might appear. So it's a lot to think about. A lot to think about, and it's a lot of money. A lot of money and time that would have to go into it. We'll see. A flag to mean you have to finish the game to unlock it? Yes. In which case, it's more safe because that means that those NPCs won't have an impact on the main story, but also that might mean that those NPCs, the way that I can put it, those NPCs might feel less enjoyable or important compared to the ones that the player just experienced. Maybe what we should aim to do with Golden Chronicles is expansions, where same idea, different location or different time period, and this is a small bite-sized story that encompasses 5 NPCs as opposed to the main game's 20, let's say. And we charge a bit more for it, but it is specifically catered to not impact the main story and is a like a side tale that we tell, similar to like Blood and Wine for Witcher 3, right? A proper expansion as opposed to just a new character or two. And something that is more separate from the main game. That way we can tell its own unique story without impacting the rest of the game's choices or something. And like plenty of DLCs and sequels kind of stamp on the Ludo narrative of the player's game and just ask for suspension of disbelief where you have these NPCs. Yeah, you are right. Although I think that for our game that where the choices are so important and key to the game, maybe stamping on the Ludo narrative may not be what we want. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe, I don't know. That's something for me, the producers, our future publisher, to just think about and brainstorm. And also people like you in chat, right? Maybe you guys have a better idea of what you want to see. Brothel update where you just make lots of boner potions for horny dudes. Alright, I'm pressing play. That's enough.
So whoever's giving you the money, publisher, Kickstarter, whatever,
What was he talking about?
they should probably agree that that's what you're doing because you will spend money on this. It will affect your production. It will affect your bug fixing and polishing phases at the end. It will affect everything. In fact, let me give you the second caveat, which is a pre-production thing. You need, if you want to have a game where the player reaches the end and can keep playing, you need to have planned for that and designed for that from the very start of your game.
Because that affects the progression, it affects the experience as a whole. And yeah, you need to plan for that. That's why it's like we need to resolve this before the end of vertical slice. Like in order to qualify as having our vertical slice complete, we need to know exactly what the end game is going to look like and what the player is expected to do after the end of the game. That just matters in so many ways, including budget and including how the game feels to play. And then, of course, post-game content, if there is any.
From the very beginning of you designing that game. Remember I said it goes settings, story, system mechanics? You're saying you want story to end, but the player to continue, and maybe some side quests, I'm assuming, are going to be in there. This will affect your system mechanics. People have mentioned this in the comments. Got some smart people in the comments, and they've said, hey, you know, you can keep letting people level up without a level cap. You just have to design for it, and you're absolutely right.
Just have to design
if you don't plan to have people continue playing your game after they finish the main quest line, and then somebody goes, let's just get rid of the level cap or the ending, and let's let people keep playing. Not only are they going to go to places that don't react to what they've just done. Like you've killed the big baddie and you're going back to town, and they're like, "Hey, welcome back to town. Do you want to buy this vase I have?" And you're like, "I just took out the big baddie." So that's a lot of new dialogue that you should probably write.
Yes, exactly. His recommendation is something like a gold standard for AAA rather than something that works on every budget. Yeah, you're right about that. You are 100% right about that coffee. And I think that good examples are Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. I think Red Dead Redemption 1 was pretty fresh in the way that it handled the epilogue. Spoilers for RDR 1. At the end of the game, John Marston dies. And you think the game is over, but you go back to a cutscene where you can keep playing as um, his son. God, what was his son's name? Jack. This was pretty cool for the time period, and there were quests that you could do as Jack after the game completed. There was an epilogue section of the game specifically designed to be played as Jack, but all of the key components um, of the game were still playable as Jack. They doubled down on that with Red Dead Redemption 2 in a way that I didn't expect but was blown away by. Spoilers for RDR 2, even though it's a prequel, you play as Arthur Morgan. He's not in the first game, and you can kind of guess why, but you then play as John Marston in the rest of the epilogue. Now, the really cool aspect of this is that there are many side quests that you may not complete as Arthur Morgan, but you can complete as John. And they've written specifically new dialogue and responses if you play these as John Marston. For instance, there's one that I remember where if you go and you fish with this guy, I think he's like a veteran or something. If you play only through his first mission as Arthur, you have this talk, you can then go and do the rest of the missions with John Marston if you never completed them as Arthur, and you'll have completely new dialogue that talks about Arthur Morgan. It's crazy, just the attention to detail and the amount of money they spent making sure the epilogue for Red Dead Redemption 2 was complete, expansive, and didn't fuck with the narrative of the game whenever you chose to finish the main story as Arthur Morgan. It is, if you haven't played Red Dead Redemption 2 or 1, 2 is a prequel. You don't have to play 1 to play 2, but I promise you it is an 11 out of 10 game. It is wild how good it is designed. I can't recommend it enough.
There's probably level design you have to change to account for it. It's like, oh, now that the big baddie's gone, maybe certain places are different. Maybe the curse is lifted from this place. Maybe the tomb no longer requires a special key to enter because it's flung open. These are things that you just have to do. But probably the most important thing is if you just kind of let people keep playing and playing, and especially if you take the level cap off, you're going to have to redesign your system mechanics because otherwise people keep gaining levels, buying perks, upping their attributes, upping their skills. Eventually they're just going to have everything. You're eventually going to run out of things to buy if that's the way you're designing your game. And they're just going to be walking gods. They're going to have every attribute at max, every skill at max, every perk, except maybe the few that say you can't have these two perks together. That's going to be ridiculous.
Like sometimes it is better that a game just ends. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes you think, oh well, the player can keep playing afterwards. But it's like the experience that the player has playing afterwards shouldn't be a sour note. Like the last moment the player experiences playing your game shouldn't be one where they've reached the end and it's just frustrating because it's not as interesting. There isn't anything else to obtain, whatever. Sure, they're going to look back at the main game and say, yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed that. But they allowed me to keep playing afterwards, and I don't really know why, because there was nothing interesting to engage in. You know? The Dinosaur Bones quest can't be completed as Arthur because most of them are past black. Yeah, I forget the name of that, but yeah, you're right. Some people want that walking god experience. Yeah, that's true. Karos, I'm going to take a look at what you've sent after this video. That way I don't open it up in the middle.
So people have suggested diminishing returns, which is once a skill, say, goes over 100, you can keep adding to it, but it only increases, say, your, let's say you have an archery skill and it increases your two hit with the bow. Maybe after 100, instead of it going up 1% with every skill point, it goes up 1% for every 5 skill points. And then it starts going up 1% for every 10, and then every 20.
I don't know. I don't really like that. I think that that kind of reminds me of Skyrim's Legendary Edition, where when you reached max level of a skill, you could make it legendary, and you would be able to level it up again. And I think you got an extra skill point or something from it. I get that why it existed. The problem is that it leveled you back to level 1. And so all of the perks that you obtained that might have unlocked things, like for instance, maybe you maxed smithing. Why would you ever go back to level 1 smithing when you need to maybe make your own like Daedric stuff? And now you can't make that because that requires level 80 or something. I don't know. Maybe it made sense maybe for some other things, but I don't think the legendary system was handled well at all. It made sense for the progression for people who wanted that endless sort of play, but it also fucked with progression to the point where it made it frustrating and not desirable to make a skill legendary. It really wasn't. Like all the perks now. So now I'm wearing heavy armor and I have perks that make me weigh less and not make as much noise in heavy armor. Well, why would I ever legendary stealth just to get another couple extra skill points when now I can't stealth at all? But I need to level stealth. So in order to level stealth, I need to stealth, but I can't do it with my new armor. So now I need to wear different armor or go back to feeling like a level 1 newbie, even though all the bandits are wearing like ebony armor and they're just going to kill me immediately. No. The main reason to let them keep playing in an empty world is to 100% the achievements and stuff. I think there are ways to handle 100%ing that can be done post game. I agree with you. But I don't think all games 100%ing is equal. Let's put it that way. But you weren't implying that. So I think that still, if you're going to have 100%ing achievements, 100%ing collectibles or whatever, and you then need to have, or you feel encouraged to have that playing after the main story is completed, your game still needs to be fun, and there might need to be some new ways to add, enemies and things. Like if your game is like Far Cry, I was trying to think of an example. If your game is like Far Cry, and you are meant to push the enemies out of each region of the game, but then you have 100%ing as a feature of your achievements or something that is beyond just clearing out these regions, how do you spawn enemies? Like maybe make a system that, and this wouldn't be too complex, of after the game is completed, the enemies try to push back and take control of territories, right? After a certain number of days. At the very least, at that point, the player's still playing and it won't be that frustrating, but they can still get those, maybe some achievements that are locked behind killing multiple enemies at once. They can do that again because enemies are spawning in enough amounts and clusters that that's still achievable and doesn't require you to start a new game. I know Infamous back in the day on the PS3 had that issue where if you cleared all of the areas before you got certain trophies, you couldn't get the platinum because there weren't any enemies to spawn, so you couldn't get some of the achievements that required you to like kill 3 enemies with like a grenade or something. I forgot what it was. So I don't know. I think even if you have the 100%, you have to design that well and you have to think about it and what you're asking the player to do.
And then every 50, and then every 100. You can still get a 200, 400, 1,000 archery skill, but it takes more and more points to get any effect out of it. There's no upper limit in theory. You could keep playing, but the game knows that, okay, eventually it's going to top out at probably in a reasonable number of hours, a few thousand hours. That you can design it to have a asymptotic curve. So it approaches 200%, and you know it's not going to go over that. Then you can start planning for, oh, what happens when someone has an archery skill of 200%? You know, maybe you cap, there's still always a 1 in 20 or 1 in 30 or 1 in 50 chance of missing.
I don't recommend that.
Maybe the extra damage that you get.
You can use an example when designing Darkest Dungeon. Um, there is a percentage chance to, I think it's for enemies. There's still a percentage chance for enemies to hit you, even if statistically there shouldn't be. And I don't like that because it's one of those things that punishes players for going above and beyond to debuff enemies or to buff their heroes. And it's like, well, yeah, you worked really hard to cheese this encounter. Also, you can't cheese this encounter anymore because of randomness. What did you do in Darkest Dungeon, by the way? Uh, I did a lot of the balancing and work on the AI after the Inhuman Bondage update. I touched a lot of the core like itemization, and I also did some overhauls to enemy AI for that. So like trinket balance, quirk balance, enemy balance. I did work on the map and AI for, oh god, what was it? It was the town incursion. In so long, I kind of forget what I touched on that. I did AI balance too and enemy balancing for the Darkest Dungeon area, like the final missions. Wish I had this type of knowledge. I just start with the story and basic gameplay, and then I realized it wouldn't work as good as I thought and gave up. Hey, it happens to the best of us, Marcus. Even people who have been in the industry and designing games for forever. If it didn't happen, we would have beautifully crafted stories from some of industry's leading experts, and we just don't. I haven't played but watched it and played plenty. A great game. I like it, though I don't like some of the design of Darkest Dungeon. I think it's way too RNG reliant, which is one of the things I tried to fix in my overhaul mod as well, that I made separately. Ooh, don't drop that.
Maybe once you go over a certain percentage to hit, it starts increasing the critical chance, but the effects of criticals still are things like, you know, extra damage, possibility of knockdown. Those don't change. It's just you get them more frequently. So there are ways to design for playing with no level cap and continuing playing the game past the main storyline, but you have to account for it from the beginning.
Yes, you do.
So that's my answer to Ian Nakamoto. But I did get questions about New Game Plus that kind of feel the same, in the same area of design to me. So let me explain that. Greg Peterson, 5857, asks, how do you feel about New Game Plus, where you can import endgame characters back into the beginning of the game with some combination of experience, items, and money? Any ideas and suggestions on how to do that well and keep things interesting?
I'll give my answer. It depends. As with everything with game design, it depends. I don't like games where they handle New Game Plus by simply, you can import yourself to the world with all the things you have on you, and then we just scale the enemies up to wherever you started. That's it. It's like, well, now I don't feel like I'm progressing. Now you've taken away the early game progression for me because my guns are already good enough to handle what I'm doing. And worse yet, the guns that felt good now don't feel as good again, and all the work that I spent at the end game of the previous playthrough to farm for good weapons feels useless. I think WoW does this, doesn't it? Just as not a New Game Plus, but when they release expansions, they raise the level cap, so all of the good armor and weapons that you farm for, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I don't play WoW, all the good weapons and armor you farmed for are now not as good as the new stuff. And so if you want to keep your character up to date and being as powerful as everybody else, you have to play the new content. It's this psychological manipulation, right? More bullet sponge doesn't mean harder. You're right about that. Calling me from Chenstohova. Why is somebody calling me from Chenstohova? I don't know who's calling me. That's the treadmill. Yeah, it's like just keep going, keep going, keep going. I don't like that personally, and I don't like how it negatively affects progression by fucking with your build and all of your progress from the first playthrough. However, I also don't like new game pluses that reset everything and then just don't change much. Like this is kind of in a similar, like you don't get your weapons, you don't get your armor, so you'll still have that new game early game experience, but then it's like, well, then what's the point? Like, why not just start a new character? They've done it in varying degrees. Sometimes, like, the first piece of gear you find in the new zone is already better. In other expansions, you will have the same gear until max level when you start doing group content. I kind of prefer the second bit. I think I more prefer what like old school RuneScape does, where very rarely do they introduce new content that becomes the new best in slot piece. Obviously, veterans aren't a big fan of this because they don't have anything new to work towards. However, it also doesn't mean that you are negating older content. Another thing is that they introduce content that fills a niche role. So while this new armor may not be as good here as it used to be, this old piece where this armor effect or this weapon is really good here, that doesn't change. It's like, well, this weapon is still really good in this scenario or against these bosses. I think what's the point is the point. It's like low effort but content for players that really want to keep playing in some way. You're right, but is it worth doing just for players who want to keep playing as opposed to them just starting a new character? I don't know. Maybe that's individual for player. That's not a yes or no question, but some players like us, some players don't. Feels bad to replace all my purples with greens on day one. Yeah, I don't like that either. And I don't like when it invalidates older gear, where it's like, well, you have to grind 20 hours in this expansion, or let's say 50 hours, to get the best gear. And then to do the new expansion, you should probably have this gear to do the new expansion well. Well, it's like, well, so I have to get to the end of this expansion, grind 50 hours before I can start this expansion, grind 50 hours, and then you're just going to release a new expansion that's the exact same thing. It's like, this is not fun to me. This is not fun progression. So how do I feel about New Game Plus? It depends on how it's handled. It really depends. I think if I could think of any game that did New Game Plus well, what do you guys think of games that did New Game Plus well? So if I had to consider it, I can't name anything off the top of my head where I was like, this is great. This makes playing it with the same character exceptional. I think I'm seeing the second option to Game Plus as for a game that takes between 1 to 5 hours to complete. But yeah, I mean, yeah. I think if the game is quicker to complete, there's more incentive to do it, and there's probably it's easier to do a better than a game that is longer form like that. Yeah, I agree. You never do New Game Plus, but RimWorld is king for me in terms of replayability. Yeah, I think there are other ways to do replayability better than what New Game Plus usually accomplishes. I think that's the way that I could put it. I did kind of like Starfield, or what it attempted to achieve with New Game Plus, which was changing what was it called, the Lodge, quite significantly and enabling a lot of dialogue options for the fact that you would complete a New Game Plus. I like that. I think that was cool. I just don't think that it was enough. And the game itself is pretty lackluster. Really enjoyed New Game Plus and Elden Ring because I found a bunch of new secrets in my second and third playthroughs, and also discovered a lot of new background stories and lore. Yeah, I think Elden Ring is pretty enjoyable, New Game Plus. I liked it as well. And it's a game that is based around challenging combat, and by making the combat a bit more challenging, admittedly through stat increases, at least was pretty cool. And I could collect different items in different playthroughs or help different NPCs. So it was a fun way to, and the game itself is also so sandboxy and open that if you want to complete the game in about 2 hours, no problem. If you want to complete the game in another 100-hour playthrough, you can. Elden Ring is a good game. That's what we can all agree on.
Okay, let me caveat this with I've never done that. I like it. I think it's interesting. I could probably do a whole video on different ways to do that, but
He's
I've
talking about
never
New Game
done
Plus.
it. So I'd be speaking incredibly theoretically and no experience at all. I will talk about some things I would do. First of all, New Game Plus, you have to remember you have to play the game entirely once to unlock it. This will be
Yeah.
important in a minute.
Is the game worth playing 2 times in a row? And that's the same thing that I felt with Golden Chronicles. It's like, would people want to play our game again, or would they just want to watch others play it? So it's like, do I want replayability? Because do I as a player want it in this game? Is this game going to be long enough to the point where there's no reason to play it again? Even if I can make different choices, I would rather watch somebody else play it and see the choices they make than maybe play it again myself. I don't know. That's something we have to discover and figure out ourselves.
But also, yes, the world is completely reset. Maybe there's a few things that don't reset. Like, well, let's talk about this. If you don't reset everything on the player, if the player gets to keep some percentage of their XP or their items or attributes or skills or perks or flaws, some percentage, you can also consider not resetting all the world. Like maybe the world resets but randomizes. So those 20 gems you had to go find are now in different places.
Yeah, and actually, that sort of randomness is a fun way to do it, depending on how the game is set up. But for instance, one of the thoughts was, for like Colton Chronicles, this was early on. I don't know if we can still do this, but was to randomize the locations of either randomize the effects that are on ingredients, so that replaying it, even though you know where certain ingredients are now the ingredients are entirely different, and you have to theorize new recipes based on your surroundings. I don't know if we'll do that, but that was one of the ideas. Games like Still, Wakes, and the Deep, and Hellblade kind of baffle me. Like, you watch someone play it, and then there's nothing left for you, even if you wanted to buy it. So that's the struggle with story-driven games. And it's also the reason why some absolutely mental, in my opinion, and completely out of touch game designers have said that you should have to pay a license fee to stream the game on Twitch. I don't even want to go into that because it's so stupid of an idea. I get why they want to do it, but it's really stupid. People love randomizers now for classic games to add replayability to Zelda and Mario and Elden Ring and Skyrim and things like that. Yeah, randomizers are really fun. Like if it's story driven entirely, that's totally okay. You just got to put interesting choices in the game. Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely agree. I always really enjoy playability in Crusader Kings 3. It always feels like a new game with different approaches and events happening to your character dynasty. My fiance fucking loves Crusader Kings. I really think this is the perfect example where Paradox Interactive shines brightest. Yeah. I think that if you create a sandbox, you kind of are, you should be aiming to create a lot of replayability. And RimWorld, Crusader Kings 3, Sims, these are all games that just bleed with replayability.
Or maybe the world resets and it's a slightly different villain, or the villain has slightly different skills or attributes, so you don't know exactly what you're going to do.
I do recommend if you're going to do, think of a game like Borderlands, right? Borderlands has replayability through New Game Plus. In my opinion, the better way to do New Game Plus in Borderlands is to introduce new enemy subtypes with different AI, that even though the gameplay is not different and the levels are the same, the levels in something like Borderlands 2 are still really fun. That's a really fun game to play. I like the gunplay. Do something that's different, introduce a new rarity of items that can drop. And now there's a new chase item to go for. I don't think they're wrong from a copyright perspective, just the business is that streaming is for almost everything such a positive that they cut their nose off to spite their face. killing streaming. Yeah, I think that it makes sense from a business perspective. Uh, but you're just, does it make sense from a business perspective that you are pissing off your fan base, even if you are correct that making this decision in a vacuum appears to make your company more money? But when you consider that the vacuum, that it doesn't exist in a vacuum, and you have a player base, that pissing off your player base probably is not a good business decision.
So the world, when you say the world is reset, there's different ways you can do that. When you say the player keeps some of their XP items and purchased attributes and skills, there's different ways you can do that.
Yeah.
You can get rid of all of it and just give them the XP or some portion of their XP, so they have to start rebuilding a character, but they get to buy some things at the beginning that they couldn't in a non-new game plus. Or you can just restore all their XP, so they're basically restarting. They finished at a level 20, they're starting as level 20, but they don't have their items or anything like that. Maybe not. Usually achievements aren't reset, and sometimes I see achievements for doing new game plus stuff.
I think here is what I would say. As a designer, if I'm considering New Game Plus, my first question should be, why would players want to play my game again? What is it that they want to achieve from that game? Is it a power fantasy? Do they just want to get exceptionally stronger and or face more difficult enemies? Do they want to experience the story again? What do they want to achieve from it? And that way I can cater the New Game Plus to give them that and then not have to worry about the rest of it. And maybe that's what they want. I'm not a fan, like Starfield has New Game Plus, but they reset all my bases. Well, then why am I doing it again? That's like, that was a lot of work that I put into it. I don't want to reset that. Maybe I want to make other decisions in the story, but now you're resetting all the things that you force me to do again in order to progress. But that's not the reason that I'm playing the New Game Plus. Changes might upset players over like mobile cash grab mechanics or anti-piracy measures. Pissing off fans hasn't been much of a yardstick. Yeah, just to note, by the way, we won't have any anti-piracy measures in our game. If you want to pirate a game, I don't really give a shit. I just hope that you enjoy the game, and maybe at one point you can afford it. But if you don't ever want to buy it, I mean, that's not my decision. I don't want you to not like my game. You want to use swords instead. It just depends. Like some games, New Game Plus makes sense because players want to replay it. Other times, it doesn't make much sense because players don't want to replay it. But if players do want to replay it, if players are asking for replayability, or you players are expecting replayability in the genre of game you're making, you need to ask yourself, what would players gain by replaying it? What are they hoping to achieve? And if it's a game like, I don't know, Doom or Borderlands that we've talked about, enemy AI improvements or enemy archetypes are a really good way that is not significantly more expensive to do this, and you can make an entirely different feeling game on that New Game Plus.
So there's a million ways you can do that. So I guess my answer is I've never done this, and while I could do a whole video, it really depends on how you handle it. I see so many ways of doing New Game Plus that it'd be hard to lock down to one of them, and it's really dependent on how you've already done your designs. So if this sounds like another one of my it depends answers, it really is.
It does.
It depends on a lot of things you've already done. But one thing I can see about New Game Plus is occasionally features get locked behind it. Like until you do New Game Plus, maybe you can't play a particular class, or maybe there's a race that's quite different than the others and you can't earn playing it until New Game Plus.
That's risky. That's really risky. Sometimes it can work. I think it works better in roguelike games where you have unlock requirements to unlock that character. Like Risk of Rain is a good example. Or, what is it? Let's just say roguelikes, because I can't think of names right now. I've been streaming for 7 hours. Either way, roguelikes are okay. I think other games where it's like you've locked behind completing your 40-hour game, a really interesting mechanic or feature that is available to use right now, if it just wasn't locked, I could play it and have more fun than with any of the other classes. Why am I not able to play it? I don't want to play your 40-hour game and then have to play it again just to play it the most fun way. That doesn't seem like that's really fair to me as a player. So it's risky. Just know that it probably works better in games with very short gameplay loops, like roguelike games, than it does in games that have a story or a much longer gameplay loop or a main campaign that takes a long time to complete.
I'm of two minds on this. It's like I don't really like letting player not have choice um, at the beginning. But if New Game Plus is something, it's the hook you want to hang your hat on for your game, I could see doing this.
Like
I could
roguelike.
also see using New Game Plus as a way to call out features in the game that you don't think are really necessary to the game, but you added for fun.
That's true. Like you could lock behind fun things or overpowered things behind New Game Plus. So you beat the game now. I think Uncharted, we talked about that before, is actually a good example where you can unlock unlimited ammo. You can choose the weapon that you want to use. You can make yourself invincible. You can lower gravity. It's just fun. Like I can go through all the levels with infinite RPG ammo. It's ridiculous. It's enjoyable. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. I think you're right. For different reasons, New Game Plus content shouldn't be the good stuff. But then if it's not good stuff, I think Tim is explaining a good usage of it here, but if it's not the good stuff, then what's the point of having New Game Plus, right?
Maybe there's a weird skill, or maybe there's some weird perks that make the game feel a little differently. So you not lock it
Yeah.
behind New Game Plus and say you can only choose to unlock this once you've played the game in the vanilla method. I'll give you an example. When we did all the weird encounters in Fallout, and then later on people were like, oh, well, I guess aliens are canon. And I'm like, I'm not sure you can assume that, because I don't really think we intended Time Lords to be canon or Godzilla to be canon. That would have been more clear if we'd hidden that behind a New Game Plus, that you have to play Fallout once and then we unlock the
That's
crazy
true. It
encounters
would
on the
be.
map. It'd be like Fallout New Vegas, the Wild Wasteland perk.
Yeah, I was just going
Maybe
to
it
bring
just
that up
says you can't
actually.
buy that until you've played the game once without it and finished it.
I think to some extent, the Wild Wasteland perk, most players, when selecting that, know that it's probably going to bring in some things that aren't canon or that aren't meant to be taken seriously. It's just like an acid trip, so it's like, it's kind of a hallucination.
And that would be the designer telling you, I know you want this, and I think it's fun to play the game like this, but I don't consider it canon, and I think you should at least experience the game canonically before you start making adjustments. It's almost like a mod that the designer included in the game. It's like your game
Yeah,
comes pre-modded.
that's a good way to
But
put it.
please play it without the mod first. That's kind of how I see another way of handling New Game Plus. But like I said, I've never done that. So that's probably all I can talk about New Game Plus from how I would design it standpoint. Greg Peterson 5857, and I hope I answered your question about playing past the end of the main story quest in Akamoto.
Yeah, another great video by Tim. That one it's a very interesting topic, and I hate to do the same thing as him and just say it depends. It is New Game Plus good? It depends. Is games that just end on a black screen good? It depends. How do you do New Game Plus well? It depends. I would just start by asking yourself, what would players want to do in my game after they complete it? What motivates them to say yes, I want to play your game again with certain things that are pre-existing from my old save. And if you think about that and you introspect on that, you might find a way to do New Game Plus in an interesting way without negatively impacting the player's experience in things that they don't care to have reset. Or just give them the option. Say, do you want to start New Game Plus with your items or without your existing items? Because maybe your New Game Plus is about something else, right? Maybe it's about re-experiencing the story. We'll just give players the option, right? And some players will want to do it with their items, some players won't. Here's the link for you guys in chat. Hopefully you enjoyed that video. I did as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching that one. See you guys later.